Welcome to the long-term care crisis, how it impacts your business and your clients. I'm Jackie Slaughter, Associate Director of Relationships for Long-Term Care at Senior Market Sales, and our guest, Brent DeGroot, Regional Account Director for Individual Life and Financial Services Care Solutions. Welcome, Brent.
Well, thank you, Jackie. I appreciate being here, and this is a great information that we're getting out to all the people who have the opportunity to watch this. You know, the risks of long-term care planning, or the lack of, is a great need in America today, and understanding those risks and who's really needing to talk to the consumers out there and really helping them understand their risks, but not only the risks, but how they can find a solution to fund that potential risk and take some of the risk off of that table. So really, whether it's a financial advisor, an insurance professional, the like, really trying to give them some good opportunities today to uncover the risk and certainly provide some solutions.
I totally agree with you. So today our discussion will support how escalating costs and the worsening caregiver crisis gaps in the U.S. retirement system can impact retirees needing long-term care, how state-led efforts to address funding shortfalls could create opportunities for insurance agents, registered reps, and financial advisors, and 3, how there are more innovative solutions today than ever to fund long-term care, from annuities to hybrid insurance policies. Then to also know that long-term care planning is not long-term care insurance. So to help frame this discussion, to get right into the mindset, we want you to start thinking about long-term care differently. The term long-term care in our industry tends to bring up the ideal of long-term care insurance, but they are not the same thing. Long-term care planning is way different than long-term care insurance. We need to disassociate long-term care with the ideal that traditional long-term care insurance is the solution. It is one of the solutions of many, but there are many different solutions today, many of which you might not even be aware of. Long-term care planning is the process of educating clients on the need of mitigating risk of needing to plan for long-term care, and also protecting their assets. So long-term care planning is included in this numerous collage of issues retirees face, but can get lost in the shuffle. That's a lot of different things happening at that certain age of an individual. It can be overwhelming. At the heart of the issue is a disjointed system of care with gaps in both coverage and people's knowledge of how the system works.
It's funny. I think that this quote does a really good job of just kind of describing what's going on here. Obviously, the prospect of becoming disabled and needing long-term care service and supports is perhaps the most significant risk facing older Americans today. It really comes down to understanding today's reality. When you see the long-term care landscape, you understand the importance of it. And the market has matured beyond its initial offerings. So rather than being a frustrating experience for advisors, it can really be fulfilling to find a solution that works best for the client's needs.
And you're right, Brent. In order for us to meet our fiduciary requirements or standard of care, we must educate ourselves and our clients to protect their assets. At the heart of the issue is a disjointed system of care, because it is with both gaps in coverage and people's knowledge. Knowledge is a powerful thing, as we've always learned. And Brent, between the two of us, we have, hate to age us, 45 plus years of long-term care experience, which is a lot. And I think we learn something new every day. And just dealing with, the people we talk to, the people we interact with in regards to long-term care, let alone we both had experience ourselves in dealing with the long-term care situation with parents. So we
Very
both
true.
understand the beginning to the end, right? So what is LTC? LTC long-term care includes services provided to people who are unable to perform basic activities of daily living, which is known as ADLs, which include bathing or showering, dressing, getting in and out of bed or chair, walking, using the toilet, and eating.
And
So
and I'll
Brent,
say this. Yeah, Jackie, if I could interrupt you there, just to say, I learned something early on in my career in long term care that really kind of put this into perspective for any advisor, insurance professional, and or any consumer out there. And if we think of it this way, it's kind of the first 20 minutes of your day. Again, maybe males take a little less, maybe females take a little bit more. I don't mean to be sexist here, but this is just something that naturally happens. So if we look at these activities of daily living, first and foremost, when we wake up, obviously we hope we held our water. That's the continence piece. We would have to get up out of bed to go take care of a toileting need. So that's getting up and moving, using the toilet, walking. So we incorporate a few there. Then many of us will take a shower to get ready for the day and dress ourselves, and then lastly, eat. So really, if you just kind of think of that first 20 minutes of your day, it's a great way to really position those activities of daily living with your clientele.
That's fantastic, Brent. Appreciate that. So, where can long term care be provided? So, there are many ways of long term care can be provided. The majority of people, from an educational perspective, think long term care and they think a nursing home. But the nursing home, we read left to right, is the last and final stage of any type of care. The majority of people are at home, in the community, in an assisted living facility, then at the least of all, in a nursing home. So, who pays for long term care? And this gets to be is misunderstanding of what pays for long term care. And Medicare, believe it or not, and most health insurance, including Medicare supplement, Medigapps, do not pay for long term care. Your health insurance that you have today does not pay for long term care. I'm irradiating this is because Medicare is a thought that people think that pays for long term care, and it does not. Medicare does cover some types of care often confused with the LTC. They might do a little bit, they've done a little bit more in a home health care perspective. Hospice care, of course, and I think everyone knows that, and short stays at skilled nursing facilities. But with limits and restrictions, there are tons of limits and restrictions, and you learn things every day because my mother had to go to a skilled, a short stay with a skilled nursing facility, but she wasn't there permanently. So, and her Medicare did pay for that. So we have to understand that there's a difference between what Medicare will pay, what a Medicare supplement will pay, or what LTC will pay for.
I was just going to say, if I could add something here,
Hmm.
I like to think of it this way. Long term care, by definition, is care that is chronic in nature, meaning it is going to last 90 days or longer.
Hmm.
So when we're looking to Medicare supplements or any of these other policies, health insurance in that regard, that's all for acute care, meaning that you're meant to get better and soon. So if you distinguish the two there and understanding, when long-term care would kick in and when your Medicare policy or Advantage plan would kick in, those are health insurance meant for acute care, meant to recover from, whereas the long-term care is that chronic care in nature and meant to last 90 days or longer, and likely you don't recover from those.
No, you don't. You do not. I totally agree. I 100% agree with you. And plus, with our both our experiences, we know that to be true. But in the United States, LTC is paid by a mix of public and private funding. And this is the most startling evidence in regards to long term care.
Sure, yeah. If we look at this, if your clients happen to be lucky enough to reach the age of 65, there is a 70% chance that they are going to need some form of long-term care service and supports in their lifetime. Now, that's a staggering number in and of itself. But now let's imagine, and I'm sure many of you have this, where you've got couples that are in your clientele, your book of business, and they're both now over the age of 65. Well, you start to do the math there. Now we're talking 91% chance that one of them is going to need care. And so when we're looking at this, it's no longer really a percentage. It's more of, a likelihood that this is going to happen. So I think we need to really start thinking about our clientels in that manner, that this is going to happen, we need to protect them. We need to bring up this particular solutions to really help our clients in those days when they may happen to receive that care. And if you look then at this alarming statistic here as well,
Yeah.
3.1% have actually purchased long-term care insurance or some sort of protection or some sort of plan. That's a pretty scary number. If we're looking at 91% for a couple, that one's going to need it, and only 3.1% of Americans have actually purchased a plan, there is a large disparity there. And that is really where we need to start talking about, hey, this great income wealth gap, if you will, or finding the income for some of these expenditures.
And you're right, Brent. It's a daunting number to think about that, of the people who only have purchased long-term care. And I know the two of us already have ours, so we're good. We're in that 3.1%, but it's the other side of that percentage. And that's why we're here now. And that's what the crisis is in regards to long-term care. Because once individuals have exhausted their Medicare or private insurance benefits, they're responsible for covering the full cost of care. So because few people have private insurance that pays for long-term care, they're still on the hook, right? So having a private pay for long-term care helps from the standpoint that it helps from a asset protection perspective. It helps from a peace of mind. Peace of mind is a big thing, and to be able to live, the quality of life you would like, because quality of life means a lot too.
I would agree. Peace of mind is essential when
Yes, it
doing any
is.
type of planning. So, yes, I haven't gotten into any of my experiences yet, but yeah, that it's crucial.
Yep, it is. Peace of mind is, uh, you just don't know. So, just to make sure that people understand of what Medicare covers and what um, LTC covers, what your health insurance covers, Brent, kind of tell us a little bit and how you deal with in doing presentations with the Medicare issue and on paying for long-term care outside of a long-term care plan.
Yeah, so kind of as we discussed a little bit before, the Medicare or those Medicap policies, health insurance is really for those medically necessary services. So again, that acute care that is going to recover from. Whereas when we're looking at long-term care, it is really meant for chronic care, so care needed for that 90 days or longer. So it really is a distinction there. If you can understand that those differences, even though some Medigap plans may pay for some very short period of time, again, that's not going to cover their long-term needs. So yes, they could maybe trigger some of the benefits through a Medicare policy or some sort of health insurance. But really, when it comes to those chronic needs, end of life or Alzheimer's, dementia type of situations, that is that chronic care that is going to last at least 90 days and likely for the rest of their lives.
Yes, and speaking in regards to that from a Medicare perspective, there are states out there who are paying the majority of long-term care benefits, right? Whether it be home health care, whether it be assisted living or nursing home. But states are looking at charging a tax to you as an employee within the state, not just working for the state, no matter who you work for. And the state of Washington did enact a state tax for that to pay for long-term care. So other states are looking into it. It's not it's just a thing to be aware of what's happening in the long-term care market today because states can't afford it. The Medicare, the government, federal or state cannot afford to, take care of individuals as we age. Because both you and I know the majority of individuals are going to live past 100, right? 100 is not the surprise age anymore. I heard a conversation in a meeting a couple of weeks ago that the generation that we have today will live past 100. And if you can remember, you have the baby boomers, but you have another generation out there that has more within their numbers than the baby boomers. So that is very interesting. So how are we going to take care of those? Because as we age, some things will not be able to function as we used to. And that's a reality. It's not being mean. It's not being rude. It's just a reality. As we age, different parts of our bodies don't work as well as they did when we were younger. We wish, right?
Yeah,
So,
so if I could touch on the state's taxation for just a
mhm.
minute, Jackie, it is interesting when Washington State put this plan in place. They didn't reach out to the insurance community, right or wrong, and it did. It really crippled the long-term care insurance community, whether it was the traditional plans, whether it was asset-based, whether it was life with a rider. There's lots of solutions out there, but it really hampered the insurance companies as far as the amount of business that was coming in. So why do we say that? Well, the state of Washington put an absolute date that you had to have a plan in place if you wanted to be exempt from that taxation. So that is really what drew the ire, I guess, of all the insurance companies out there, and many of them, in the end, had to pull out of the state offering their solutions because it was just too overwhelming. Think of the pig and the python kind of, in that sort of analogy, if you will. So these other states that are out there looking at these types of plans, their Medicaid budgets are in the red. That's where they're getting most of the extra spending that they're doing for any of the long-term care services and supports for individuals who have not planned. And we need to think about this. Medicaid is really for those that are destitute, so those that didn't have the means. Those that are going to a Medicaid planning attorney to avoid, you know, spending down their assets to avoid and just go on Medicaid. I think that is something that they really need to reconsider, largely because they lose all choice at that point. Once you are forced to go on Medicaid, you're going to go where the government tells you. That will be a nursing home. So if our clients, or if you're talking to your clients about going to a Medicaid attorney and planning for spend down, I just don't, again, I think
Yeah.
that's something that really needs to be addressed. And I think you need to have your clients reconsider. There is a much better way, whether it's self-insuring in some form or fashion, or using any of the solutions that are available out there to actually pay for some of these services. But you know, to go on the government dime when you don't need it, that's kind of irresponsible, in my opinion. So just my opinion. So that being said, those other states that are now lining up, what we're going to see for most of them, nothing's set in stone yet, but I don't think they'll set a forward-looking date to say, hey, you have to purchase a policy by this date, otherwise you're going to be taxed. That's what really crippled the industry. And so the other states have looked at what Washington State did and now are saying, okay, well, we won't do that because that was too much on the system, too much stress on the system. The piece that you need to really focus on is they may enact these laws and it'll say from that date or even a past date that if they didn't have anything, that your clients then would be taxed in that particular state. So it's important to do that planning now because we don't know what those states will look like as far as providing an exemption. So if they have a plan in place now, if that's some sort of exemption that they get around that tax, it's important to start that process now.
I totally agree with you. And then as part of that too, people just, I guess I'm just repeating what you said, Brent. They need to plan today. There's nothing wrong with planning today and getting over. That's one less thing you have to do as part of your retirement plan is take care of the long-term care. You're healthy today, and there's a will, there's a way. Trust me, it depends on how much money you want to spend. I'm sure we can find you something, and something's better than nothing. Don't like using that phrase, but there's too many plans out there that will accommodate almost everyone that is out there. There's some
Correct.
things that underwriting we can't touch, but there's a lot of plans that we can. Okay, so when we talked about Medicare and who pays for it, Medicaid, and if you want to spend down, which I don't think most people want to spend down, not after working as many years that you put in, especially seniors working longer today, to work that longer to have a good retirement, why would you want to spend down that money? So think about that. Also, we need to talk about the cost of care, which surprises many seniors, and national average, which is different for each state, and cases can be higher, but these numbers increase on a yearly basis, starting at the lowest end of 3% or higher. Because when I went looking for an assisted living, they told me once you get here, we're going to do 3% increase every year. So that bill goes up. So this is a cost of care at the annual um, medium, national medium across the United States. But just remember, states are different and these costs can be way higher. These are pretty lenient in my standpoint for a national average, but you're mixing large states with small states, rural areas, etc. But the cost of care, even looking at this, and then think down the road, because you won't necessarily go in. Let's say you got your policy in your late 40s or early 50s, you have to your 80s. Most people claim at age 80 to 85. So there's some growth in that. But just think, if that's today for 2024, what's it going to look like in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now?
Well, and I thought it was really interesting too, Jackie, that to really afford 1 year of assisted living facility, so $64,200. You know, an average American will have to save for 17.2 years just to afford that 1 year. That is an alarming stat. And then when you look at if they're looking at 2 years, 60% of adults are going to be unable to afford 2 years, and that's why again it's so important to do that planning now. Put yourself in a much better position down the road. There are better ways of self-insuring or just hoping that it won't happen to you.
Yeah, it's a crisis, and that's why we're talking about today. You
Very
need to get
true.
in front of your clients and discuss something that's going to impact them in their lives. It's not now. The question is when. We don't want it to happen. We hope you don't need to use an LTC plan, but if you have to, considering you're living longer, past 100, you have to plan. Everything's about planning. Anything you do, you plan for. You plan for a vacation. Why can't you plan for your future? And in this case, you're planning for your children's future too. Because now we want to talk about the caregiver. Now, being a caregiver is an interesting role, and a lot of people, their plans are, well, I'll let my kids take care of me. Okay. So the question becomes, do they know they're taking care of you? And do you really want your children to take care of you versus letting them live the lives that you brought them up to live? So, it gets a little bit personal when you start talking about using family to take care of you. But you have to understand what the caregivers go through. And right now before we were looking at you as the policyholder and making a plan. But also now let's look at the other side of the coin of the caregiver. If a caregiver is a child, or should the caregiver be someone that the child can help supervise your care if you're at home or wherever you're at? Because you do need that, someone to supervise to make sure you're getting the things that you need to get done in your home. So you rather your child to supervise, or whoever that person you choose, right? That's going to be close to you. It's going to be your advocate. You rather for them to support the caregiver and you to get things done. So 40% of caregivers say their caregiver responsibilities impact the household financial security. And we know this because everyone knows, usually if it's a parent, do when you go to the grocery store and you're shopping for you and you're shopping for them, right? Are you going to say, let's split this up, right? It's easier. You just do it because they are your parents. It's a full circle deal. They took care of you and here we go. We have to take care of them, et cetera, et cetera. It's the law of life. Um, then you have two times caregivers are likely to experience a layoff as compared to non-caregivers, especially if they're doing it as a family member. You don't get that many days off of work, right? And every time you come in and say, I need to take off today, or I can't make it in today, and you used all your vacation, you used all your sick time, how's the company going to feel about that, right? So who's the first one to go, right? Let alone you going 20% saying their responsibilities, they're limiting their career growth or job opportunities because they're not there. They're not there to be able to learn to grow within their job. So their careers go away, right? And no one wants that to happen to their children. That's not what we had them for. That's not what we raised them to be. We raised them to be independent. And we don't want to ever impact their lives. They're supposed to be able to live their lives, and that's what we had them for. So caregivers are affected in a long-term care scenario, especially if you choose them to be family members. We don't want them to be family members, right? We prefer to be, as I said before, someone else doing that task. Planning for long-term care allows you that. Brent made a comment before. You get to choose. You get on Medicaid, you don't get to choose. And if you have an experience out there looking for a Medicaid bed for a person who happens to fall into the Medicaid category, and maybe not just because of planning, but just because of their way of life, there aren't that many beds. You don't get to choose. You're right. The government says you can go here or here because the government doesn't pay as much as the private pay, right? And so they love private pay. If you went in there and had a plan, welcome, sir. What would
It's
you like
amazing.
to do today, right? How the
It's amazing
attitude
how those beds
changes.
open up. Right. Right.
They will do bend over backwards to help you. Sometimes give you some discount. That's interesting. I remember that
Yeah.
happening with my mom. They're willing to guide you 100% along the way. Ask you questions about was your spouse a veteran? They come up with ways of finding that funding for you to help support that. So that's fantastic. But we have to remember it's all about your planning, and how the outcome comes depends on how you plan.
Jackie, can I add just a little color here on the
Go
last
for
slide
it.
too, if you would mind bringing it back up for me?
Okay.
You know, a power phrase that I've used kind of throughout my career in long-term care is that, help your, look, if you are thinking that your kids or, another family member is the one who is going to care for you, really by putting a good plan of care in place, you allow your family members to love you and be the care managers versus the caregivers. So take them out of the caregiving space and let them be the managers of that care. That really goes a long way in solidifying relationships within the family, within the person needing care and the caregiver themselves. So that really helps. So again, a good long-term care plan can be the exact thing that really helps them be the care managers versus the caregivers. So, knowing that many times somebody, and I'm going to pick on us males here, oh, well, I raised them all my life. Of course they're going to take care of me when I'm older. Is that really what we want? Probably not. We want better for our kids than we ever had it ourselves. And so then to force them to be a care manager of you, excuse me, a caregiver for you in the time of need really takes them away from a lot of their duties. They could be squarely in the family, the sandwich generation, meaning, they're caring for their kids that are younger, and they're caring for their ailing parents as well. That's why they call it the sandwich generation. Puts extra stress on those individuals. Obviously, if they have to take time off of work, Jackie, like you said, does that put strain on financials? Does it put strain on their vacation time? Does it really put strain on the family overall from that standpoint? So just make sure that allow them to be the managers. They want to love you in any way, or certainly the care recipient themselves. They want to have their family love them, but let them love them through management of that and not necessarily being a caregiver themselves.
Totally agree, Brent. And also, when you talk about siblings, as part of that, the sibling that, so to speak, gets stuck in doing that, and it's not being stuck because the sibling probably wants to do it, but then it also can tear siblings apart. So you want your family to stay a family in that
Very
piece
true.
of making a plan, because it can get a little interesting.
Very
If
true.
everybody doesn't know their role and you haven't planned, and part of that planning is the discussion of who will do what and how we want to do it and how it will be executed.
Yeah,
So,
and the last thing that I'll add there, Jackie, you hit it right off the top on this particular slide is, if they are planning that their children are going to take care of them, do your children know that? Have you discussed that with them? So just as you said there in wrapping up, discussion is key. So make sure you're discussing this plan with your adult children as well.
Yep, it's nothing no with a little knowledge and education for them, so they'll know that you have this plan. Don't let them find the plan in the papers afterwards, right? Some, but yeah, that would be just disheartening, especially if your family did break up because of not discussing it and finding out later that you did have a plan but didn't know. That can be heartbreaking. Um, and as we were talking in the other slide, and this kind of just accentuates that slide of caregiving is a risk of the caregiver's wealth, and it does. And looking at the percentage of the caregiver's salary that goes towards helping the person who needs the help, right? 26% of the family's caregiver salary. That's quite a bit when that 26% could have came out of a plan, a long-term care plan versus coming out of their pockets. That's even if you think about it, that's probably an annual pay. If you think of it for a plan,
That's
right? It's
exactly right.
probably more what you
Yeah.
need, right? If that's their
Yep.
salary on an annual basis, that's definitely worth putting towards a plan for your long-term care needs. So we want to make sure that with your plan, it addresses the financial, and that's what it does. One less thing to think about because you have to remember if a person goes on claim, you got the emotion, you got the financial, you got the who's going to do it, where they're going to be at. There's a lot of other things to have to worry about. Take a piece of it out of the picture by planning.
Yeah, and Jackie, if I could add to that too, what's interesting is I've seen this happen throughout our careers, really. Whereas maybe somebody starts to be a caregiver, or even prior to that, they realize that, look, mom and dad don't have a plan here. And I think really as a sibling, depending on how many there are, could be an only child, could be, multiple siblings, that they get together and say, let's pool our resources and purchase a plan for mom or dad or both of them if that's the case. And again, you can see where some of this, that's an annual payment. Three siblings could easily split that up and make sure that that protects their financial inheritance and really, again, puts a good plan of care in place for their parents as well.
You are 100% correct. They don't care who pays for it, right? And sometimes that would be a fantastic Father's Day or Mother's Day gift to your parents, or grandparents. And you're right, as people see it happening today to them, right? And their parents didn't plan, guess what? They're starting to plan because they don't want their children to fall into the same bucket that they're into today. So make that plan. This is all about planning. It's not about long term care insurance, it's about planning. Have a plan in place. And Brent, how about the 401ks that
This
were
is an interesting quote. It says individualized 401ks were never intended to replace pensions. They were meant to be a supplemental vehicle, and we're expecting 401ks to do a job that they were never designed for. Well, what's interesting is that, a 401k, as most of us know here watching this particular webinar today, that is a qualified dollar, meaning pre-taxed. So qualified funds is now a source that you can use to protect the rest of the portfolio. And many advisors, insurance professionals have no idea that qualified funds can be used. And so there are solutions out there today that allow you to use qualified funds to protect the rest of the portfolio. So not only do you put the care in place, you put a plan in place, and now you've got a great way to do it. Because if you think about the average American today, where are we saving all of our money today? It's all in 401ks, all in these qualified dollar situations, IRA, personal IRAs, 403bs, whatever the case may be. But it's all in qualified dollars. And why not just take a portion of that portfolio to protect the rest of the portfolio, put that great plan of care in place, and make sure that everybody's happy in the long run?
100%. But Brent, also, you briefly touched on the types of funding for long-term care, but there are also many ways to use an asset to fund long-term care. In our next webinar, we'll include specific usage of assets and how they provide the solutions. But here are a few things that I'm sure you dealt with in your career and let alone with the company that you work for.
Yeah, so looking at some of these hybrid policies. Some people call them asset-based, some people call them hybrids, but basically it's taking a policy like a life insurance plan or an annuity and using either the cash value out of the annuity or the death benefit out of a life insurance plan for any of those LTC expenditures. So that's a different way of covering this need versus maybe the traditional. For the longest time, the traditional LTC insurance plans were out there. This little bit combines the best of both worlds, right? So you've got a little death benefit in case you don't ever need services. Again, a high likelihood that you're going to, but or in the annuity, the cash value, and that can be passed on to beneficiaries as well. So a little bit of the best of both worlds. However, still may be a little bit more in cost than maybe a traditional plan. So traditional is never going to go away. That it really depends on every client situation. Each one is different, and to know which solution is best, really you've got a great resource here at Senior Market Sales. You just need to talk to Jackie, her team here at Senior Market Sales, and explain your client situation and really how they may look to fund a plan. So a good resource here for you. If we look at using health savings accounts, that's another way of potentially paying for either the care itself or a solution, putting some of that solution in place. The IRS has a provision called 7702B, which allowed for health insurance or that portion of health insurance to be considered to be eligible to either pay for on a tax-free basis the care needed or as a plan itself. So looking at these HSA types of plans, we can use some of that pre-tax money to actually put a plan in place or pay for some of that care. So don't discount if your client has an HSA. They've been around for well over 10 years now. There's some sizable amounts in these HSA accounts, and there's a great way to put a plan in place using some of those monies as well.
And thank you, Brent. So, this is part of our white paper for the retirement mind shift, and all of these should be addressed in retirement planning. Every area within this should be part of an advisor and or agent. When you're talking about your client's retirement, everyone should be addressed, and of course, long-term care is included. So, in order to fulfill our fiduciary requirements, we must educate ourselves and our clients to protect their assets. That's why advisors and agents have a mind shift in thinking. You should shift the mind. Things are changing in this world. So when things change, and we hope everything has a change, you have to enjoy the change. And to be able to be part of that change, you have to accept it, right? And some ways of accepting it are the first three that we have listed here. Revised traditional retirement planning and programs and practices. You need to look at what's happening today in the world. Plans are changing, products are changing, etc. And you have to be ready for that. That way you can make sure you can explain to your client, of which we help you with. And Brent sometimes helps us too in explaining it, because some things can get it. Long-term care isn't easy. It has a lot of moving parts. But once you get in the main portion of it, it becomes easier. Then you have to reimagine your role, right? Because products and scopes of services have changed. You have to understand, once I sell a product, how does that happen for that client to be able to have a claim? What happens during that process? And then recalibrate your business to the next generation of customers. Don't forget they have kids. The majority of people who have assets have children that they're leaving things to. Get to know them. Don't just worry about the mom and the dad. And also, I'm going to throw in a little bit, don't forget about the wife, because mainly men are basically taking care of the financials. But what happens when something happens to that primary man and you have a female? You got to include them in the conversation. Don't ever make them feel like they're not included or they'll go elsewhere. And that's how it affects your AUM. Remember, your clients are what make you who you are, right? Your clients make your business. So don't forget about them. In any realm or scope of the thing, don't forget about your clients.
These are
Because,
three great reminders, Jackie. Yeah.
yeah, don't forget about them. Um, The other thing, Brent, and I know you brought this up before about the 3.1% of Americans that have long-term care today. That is, we talk about, that's sad because I look out there and I see how much, we as a organization sell in long-term care, and then you look at the thought of all the other specialists out there pushing that long-term care, and we only have 3.1%.
That's scary.
Yeah, it brings tears to my eyes because it feels like you're working on something and you'll never see the top, right? That stack
Yeah.
just keeps getting bigger. But I think it's all education, and I think more education is out there on planning, not the insurance. It's the planning, and we support what that client is looking for. It's not about what we want, right? It's about what they want to see and how their plan works out with the rest of their retirement.
Yeah, I think this is a
And
great visualization right here. Just talking about planning with your clients versus the insurance piece. So, yeah, Jackie, you hit that right on the head.
SMS has always been about health and wealth. Our LTC specialist for the education of LTC planning, including multiple ways of how to start a conversation regarding long-term care. The plan has to be based upon the client's need and factored into every retirement. I know we stated this all the way through this webinar, but it has to be factored. Guess what can blow up a retirement plan? An LTC event that you weren't looking for because it is instantaneous. It happens in a blink of an eye, right? You don't have to be an LTC specialist. We have Brent that helps us out with a lot of things, and we're able to guide you through the process with our knowledge of the LTC market for today and the future and what we see that's happening. And that's based on research. Things have changed from the beginning. The very first policy that probably was ever sold, it was sold for nursing home. And that's the biggest confusion. Long-term care is not about nursing home. It's about any type of plan of care that you would like. It's not the end all of nursing home. Um, so I just want to make sure that you don't forget to fill out our survey. There's a survey at the end of this webinar. And we have the retirement planning mind shift, the new thinking for growth in a new era that you're able to download. And we also decided that to follow up on this webinar that we provide a client piece for you. 3 questions to ask yourself about long-term care. This kind of gets to help you to get that conversation started. If you hand this to your client, we do have another page that teaches you how to get in front of your client, but this helps them read it for themselves. Some people sometimes have to have that material in front of them. They want that piece of paper and they want to be able to understand, right? But I think you have one thing going for you. A lot of people are experiencing long-term care events today.
And I tell you,
So,
when Jackie, when they do look at materials like this, a consumer, they do like it from a third party source, not necessarily directly from
right.
an insurance company. So, great piece here.
Um, so these are pieces. Fill out the survey, and you would get a copy of our white paper and our LTC infographic. And people like to see some color and some different infographic pieces, right? Because it tells a story. And that's all we're trying to do is tell you a story of how to get in front of your clients so they are prepared. It's all about planning. So get contracted with SMS, and Brent and I would like to thank you for taking your time out of your day to join us for this LTC webinar, because LTC is a crisis that's facing our nation today and the future, and we have to plan for it. And it's our job to help people to plan for it. So have a great day, and Brent and I appreciate you taking out your time to watch this. Thank you.
Thank you all.